Hello, I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge. Welcome to another edition of Half Hour on the Hill. I have today a special guest, a very good friend of mine and colleague, Representative Dan Sena, representing the 37th Middlesex District, including part of Acton. So Representative Sena, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was thinking that I remember meeting you when you were in high school.
Yeah.
I was always, we've talked about it a little bit, but I'm always curious, when you arrived here from Brazil when you were, 13 or 14?
14,
is that right?
Yeah, that's right,
Yep.
14. I was always wanted to be involved in government or in politics one way or the other.
Even in Brazil?
Even in Brazil, yeah.
Okay.
I think I noticed this when I was eight or 9.
Oh, wow, okay.
And the reason of this is because my uncle was a select man in my hometown.
Okay. Yep.
And I remember what I recall my early memories is passing out his cards or his pamphlets.
Okay, yeah.
During the
Yep.
election day, outside when people were voting, and of course they changed all the rules because you can't campaign during the election day. But and that's what I recall, and I saw the way he campaigned, or it's a different style, but
Different style,
they do
right,
like
right.
almost like a rally.
Okay, yeah.
But it's they have a name, and I'll bring it. It's a Portuguese name.
Yeah.
And basically, they go on the truck or they have speaker. They go that becomes the podium, where they go
okay.
and they give speeches, and you really see ways that they can connect with the residents and ways that they can be helpful to the community.
Sure.
And
yeah.
and I asked my mom and my dad at one point, why aren't you guys running for office?
Right.
So
Yep.
I think that was early on. Yeah.
That's great. So you took that sort of seed and interest, and then when you came to Acton, came to the U.S., were there things that you started following to get interested in politics or government? Or?
Yeah. So I saw a lot of inequalities.
Yeah.
Not only here, but in Brazil primarily, and
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
kind of became my centerpiece as to public service. What can I do to minimize that growth, that difference? And being a student here, as a dreamer, and I felt, oh my gosh, all the barriers we have to obtain, for example, student loans, for example, or financial aid.
Yes.
And then living here and really seeing the lack of, the community living in the shadows, if I may say, where they couldn't get a license. And that's why when we met, it was really in-state tuition. It was the work and family mobility that took so long to pass. Trying to bridge that gap between those who have so much and those who have so little.
Absolutely. And I really have appreciated your focus on that inequality piece for everyone. I think that's something that really drives you. And I know when we met when you were in high school, you were doing some advocacy for federal immigration reform.
That's
you were
right.
going to D.C.
Thanks for reminding me. Yes, so I did go to D.C. in the mid-2000s a couple times. One was to lobby for immigration reform. The other was for the DREAM Act. And then we actually met with Senator Kerry. At that time, I took a picture. I remember taking a picture with him, and also we didn't get to meet with Senator Kennedy, which really has been someone who I like to listen to his speeches.
Yes, true hero to so many.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also been at the State House advocating for in-state tuition right during high school. So I think the passion to serve or the passion to be an advocate for others, I think I do it out of my own will.
Absolutely. And so you graduated from Acton Boxborough, and then obviously wanted to continue your education.
Initially I was studying engineering. So my mom was a math teacher back in Brazil, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna do engineering. Because I thought of even maybe having to go back to Brazil to be an engineer there.
Yeah.
But then things changed where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna study what I like, which was political science. And then that led me to an internship at your office eventually, and a position. So that opened up the doors for me to be working in government.
Right.
So I'm very appreciative of you hiring me at that time to do the work that I was able to do. So really, thank you.
And talk about you went to both Middlesex Community College and UMass Amherst,
yes, right? That's right.
Yep.
I got my associate's degree from Middlesex Community College, and that was liberal arts and science. And then from there, I went to UMass Amherst, where I majored in political science.
Yep. Were you active in any
Somewhat,
politics
somewhat,
there?
a little bit, because it minimized the time, the free time that I have
Right,
with
right.
the schoolwork. So I did very minimum, but I still went to debates. I still went to listen. There was a debate, and it was Elizabeth Warren was there.
Okay.
And we were able to attend that.
Yep.
So it was great.
And one of the, talking about inequality, I know when I would see you during your time studying both at Middlesex and UMass Amherst, you were also working.
That's right. Yeah, I
Yep.
worked at grocery stores and moments like landscaping. And
Yep.
one time I think I did 1 week of roofing, which that's as long as I could last. But throughout college, I was waiting tables and really working at grocery stores to just basically to be able to get by.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we're making some progress in the budget is the debt-free college.
I'm so happy
yeah.
that we were able to do that. The fact that you can actually be able to go to college and not having to worry about paying a tuition and just focus on your own expenses in terms of housing or groceries. But really, I'm really, and I want to see that expand for the whole, state universities if possible.
Absolutely. And you mentioned housing. So obviously, moving to Acton with your mom. So, living in, sort of a lot of the apartments on Great Road or in Acton in general.
That's right. Yeah. I recall helping my mom with the rent. I said, hey, Mom, there's,
Yeah.
because I saw her struggling. She was, even though she was a teacher back home and came here, she was working at Burger King, for example. So.
She worked at Burger King. She did childcare.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So and certainly now we see the need to improve the wages for teachers, even at kindergarten level, like a pre-K. I was actually at the State House yesterday, and I testified one of my bills on universal pre-K to try to get the discussion going. So we can have some movement on that.
Yeah, what do you want to talk a little bit about what your bill?
Sure. Yeah.
What
So
your
my
bill
bill,
does?
we modeled from a couple of states that has something. In Vermont has a piece of legislation. Washington D.C. So we wanted to provide some hours of public pre-K education to little kids from 3 to 5. Initially, my bill, when I first filed, it called for 20-something hours per week.
Okay.
And now I felt like that was too little. Why don't we ask for 30? And we just slightly changed to 30 hours.
For the kids?
For the kids, yeah.
Okay.
So that allows for their mom or dad to work part-time or even, be able to work full-time while their kid's going to school.
Absolutely. And that would be free for the children?
It's basically an idea of pre-K to 12, but really extending
Right.
to 3 and 4 and 5 years old.
Right. Okay. And have you partnered with organizations on this? How did you come to file the bill?
Yeah, so when I was campaigning and meeting with families and seeing them at home with their kids, and they really brought this up that we need childcare.
Yep.
So that was a kind of something that I had to do. I had to be on record to supporting such a idea, but also filing. I wanted to file a bill on this.
Absolutely.
And I think it's great for not only for the families, but also for the economy, because we know that when we invest $1 in education, we gain between $4 and $9 back. At least that's what some of the studies have shown.
Sure. And so this was the Education Committee hearing yesterday?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And we actually have a tour with Chair Garlick is coming to.
Great.
To Acton? To Carol Huebner School. The first week of November, she's going to tour the facility, because right now there's a lottery for people to get in there, for students to get in. So I think we want to be able to say, what can we do at the state level to help small towns to expand their programs.
And I know you, of course, you and your wife have three young
kids. Yes.
So you've really seen the financial challenges of universal pre-K.
Yes, and it costs, on average, Jamie, Senator, $20,000 per year.
Yeah.
It's almost like another mortgage.
Oh yes, exactly. Often more than a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So you've really seen that impact.
Yes, and that was the testimonies we received. It was also very similar stories.
Sure. You're on the Education Committee.
I am. Yeah.
So is the Education Committee, which on the House side led by Representative Denise Garlick, on the Senate side, Senator Lewis, is the committee doing tours? Is it focused on early ed?
They are. They're going around the district or they're around the state to see and meet with some of the teachers and students to see what their needs are. And I think that's so important because it's really connecting with the communities of the work that we're doing. Because we can't legislate alone. We have to work together to be able to have an impactful bill and how we can work towards achieving that goal.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, the Senate last session did pass a version of an early education bill. So I think the hope is that this session, you know, will actually get something to the
Absolutely. We'd love to see that. So yeah.
And you're someone that is very vigilant in attending committee hearings, including education.
You know, I learned so much because sometimes there's a bill out there that we might not be thinking about it. And for example, I'll give an example where there's a piece of legislation calling for a little of greater school breaks. Because even that has an impact on how well the students can do in school. So you know, sometimes looking outside of the box on how we can you know, work together to actually pass ideas that it really impacts all the students.
Absolutely. And I know there's been a big discussion about starting school later for parents.
Yes,
that kids go to school too early and it's not productive for the kids or the parents.
Yeah, I think that would be a plus.
Yeah, right.
Always need that extra hour.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of things that the Education Committee is facing and hearing from, and it's also doing these tours to what you said Chairwoman Garlick is doing.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm really proud to be in that committee because it's a passion of my education, and I'm actually on the other three committees that I have is consumer protection, professional licensure, that's one, and then cybersecurity, that's another, and then we have education.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to, we'll get into that in a second. We're going to take a break right now. We're on Half Hour on the Hill, and we'll be back in a moment with more conversation with Representative Dan Sena. Thanks.
The impact of a meal goes well beyond feeding our bodies. Food can open endless possibilities for people to thrive. Because when people are fed, futures are nourished. Everyone deserves to live a full life. And with your help, together we can end hunger. Join the movement at feedingamerica.org/actnow.
Hi, State Senator Jamie Eldridge here for the second edition of Half Hour on the Hill. Very proud to be talking with Representative Dan Sena. So, Representative, we talked about your early education bill and the committees you serve on. You know, of course, every legislator, you know, usually has a handful of bills that they're particularly focused on. So I know on the education bill, education front, you also have a bill that's really garnered a lot of interest from across the Senate district I represent around robotics. And if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
I think it's
so
one of
my
those
first.
things that's interesting.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for highlighting this bill. I have. So when I was first elected, I had an intern of mine who was from the A and Shirley High School. And she brought it up the lack of support from the state when it comes to robotics or STEM education. So she brought it up this idea that their school has a robotics program, and how can we actually expand that throughout other schools? And that's why we filed this bill together. I filed this bill with actually Senator Viles in the Senate, and I'm so glad that he was very receptive to the idea. Also, we modeled this bill in a way that would allow for pre-K students, people who are also kindergarten, elementary level, middle and high school, to be able to apply for some funds from the state, perhaps by DESE, that would allow for students, for schools to, let's, for example, get $20,000, for example, to initiate a robotics team.
Sure.
For their schools.
And they compete against
Yes,
regional schools, statewide,
right.
nationwide.
And the main idea on this, Jamie, is because of the STEM education that they would receive. It's like in
Sure.
math, science, technology, and everything, engineering. So that's just opening the minds, because we're living in a
Yeah.
world that technology is growing so rapidly. And I think
Yes.
sometimes that's a way for us to maintain that knowledge. So I think I'm really proud of the legislation. Has got a lot of momentum.
It really has, yeah. And I know I've gone to the Littleton Robotics, to Ayer Shirley, which we represent together. I've been to Marlboro, so it really seems to be a growing movement. And yet, to your point, even in a state that really does invest in education, there really isn't that much government investment in robotics clubs or teams.
Absolutely. So I was very glad, because this idea came from a student.
Yes.
And so and I always say Olivia Stryker, I always thank her for that
Oh
idea.
yeah,
So,
terrific intern.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's so great to get these ideas from our constituents
Yes.
and then file into
Yes.
legislation.
Yes. And matter of fact, I went to their school. I gave a speech on their graduation, and I mentioned the
Oh,
bill,
Ayer Shirley?
and everybody
Yeah.
was clapping. So it was great. It was great. Yeah.
That's great. In a similar vein, talking about other bills that have come out of our communities, there's the private wells bill.
Yeah.
Working with some of our constituents, including Dr. Amy Shea from Stowe, who's the CEO of the Foundation of Central Mass Foundation. If you could talk a little bit about that bill, which has gotten a lot of interest, and there was a Globe editorial endorsing the bill this past weekend.
Yeah. I actually had a meeting with Amy Shea even before this bill was an idea. Well, so I was like, I'll be glad to file this bill.
Yes.
And so the first time, and thank you for filing the Senate. I know you're taking the lead there. So the fact that there are families or there are individuals who are consuming contaminated water and not knowing, and the detrimental to their health that could potentially. And I think this bill brings to light that we should be making sure families know that they have at least the resource to check their water, the quality of the water.
Yeah.
And I know what this bill is modeled Title V, so basically it only would obligate for that once they has a sales and purchase agreement or pending. So I think it's just very important. It's a public health issue.
Absolutely, and the Globe editorial highlighted one of our constituents, Mary Brolin from Boxborough, who had a contaminated well to her surprise.
Yeah. I spoke with her, and she became almost the reason as to why this bill is so important.
Absolutely.
Like an example.
Yeah. So you filed, you file a good number of bills. Are there other bills that either you filed or that you're focused on, or just that you're interested
also
to talk
climate
about?
change is always something in our minds.
Yes.
And even though we voted on the net neutral for 2050,
Right.
it's like working to achieve that goal.
Yes, exactly.
How we can make more wind and solar energy and clean energy, so we can actually reduce our emissions. So I think that's something very important, that it's always in my mind.
Yep.
So for the next generation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So climate is clear. It's not clear what the legislature is going to tackle. I know that today, actually, Governor Healy is filing an affordable housing bond bill, and from what I'm hearing in the news this morning, a significant amount of funding, $1.6 billion for public housing, to renovate, public housing. So I think that's going to really make a difference to upgrade and fix a lot of the older public housing stock that really isn't in good condition for our constituents.
That's a great idea. That'd be great to support that and see. And actually, there's pieces of legislation that calls for upgrading their heating system to a more efficient, like heat pumps, for example.
Right, exactly.
I think that's a great way, because not only you're saving money, but also you kind of, using cleaner energy. I think that's a great way to go about it.
Absolutely. I know, talking about an affordable housing crisis we've seen in our district that we represent together in Ayer, the Devon's Crest, which continues to be an issue.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Acton residents probably aren't aware of it. If you could talk a little bit about what what actually happened there, what's going on.
So I want to say almost, I don't know if it was like 100 families, but
Yes, yeah, I
many,
think
many,
so.
many, many
Yep.
families who resided in these units for many years, and whom some are even veterans of their, because they
Right.
serve in Devons and so on, and now that they were basically receiving eviction notice. Because the new property owner wants to renovate and
Right.
displacing many families, and to me that's really so sad and unacceptable.
Yeah.
And the fact that luckily right now we're still delaying some of these evictions, but a lot of the families were forced to leave.
Right, or they decided to leave on their own accord. Yeah.
So very sad, and I think we need to be discussing ways that we can not only build more homes but affordable homes.
Exactly.
And that's something that we really keeps me in my mind. And how can we, pass bills that it's going to address this issue?
Absolutely. And I think that's an important distinction you made, is that obviously there's this push just to produce more housing in general, but if we're not building housing that's truly affordable, it's not going to help residents, including those at Devon's Crest.
Even here in Acton, you see big homes, like for me,
Right.
almost a mansion. I don't want to say mansion, but over $1 million. And it's like, how
Yes.
can a working class afford that? It's almost impossible.
Right.
So
Absolutely. The other town, what are all the towns that you represent besides
I
Acton?
represent Acton, Boxborough, Harvard, Ayer, Shirley, and a piece of Groton.
Okay.
With Rep. Scarsdale. My district, initially it was Lunenburg, and then because of the redistricting, it changed a little bit, where now I have Groton. And Harvard is a town that is so rural that they rely on private wells
Yes.
so much, and I think
yes.
another importance as to why the private private wells bill was so important to file.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that you and I just recently had a transportation forum in the Neshoba Valley.
Yes.
What were some of the things you took from that forum that our constituents
What I
brought up?
liked, it was great that we actually were able to ask.
It was a great
get
turnout,
questions. One thing that I really liked to hear was the fact that he was thinking of being creative, where we are building rail trails, or that gives you an ability to go get ice cream, for example, or
Right.
go to a convenience store, or take the train and being able to walk there or bike. I think that's just a great way, because it takes away the pollution, and it's great for your health and
Yep.
the ability to do that. I think it adds to the quality of lives of the residents in our districts.
Absolutely. And we partnered together during your services is my district director on upgrading the Fitchburg line, including, of course, completely upgrading the South Acton train station.
Yes.
We're now hearing from other towns about their communities getting new stations, including Ayer and Shirley.
Yeah, I would love to see that in Shirley and Ayer. There's a need to improve their train station, at least to have a station.
Absolutely.
And I know Ayer took the lead on having bathrooms there.
Right,
So
right.
that's great.
Something I know you're very passionate about.
Something maybe Shirley can keep in mind when they are doing the renovations.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we're in the process of MART, the Regional Transit Agency, asking for a study for Ayer and Shirley about, what it would cost and could we build these ADA accessible upgraded train stations.
Yeah. And I would hope that, I know it takes a long time, but I would hope that we can do something sooner. But sometimes you just have to work with the timeline.
Right. And obviously the funding, so with the millionaire's tax that passed last year by the voters, the mass fair share, is dedicating that to some of that to the MBTA, RTA, cities and towns for roads and bridges.
And I actually want to meet with Bruno, who knows so much about this and how we can be creative in getting funds, what kind of grants are available so that the town could apply. I think it's something we need to work on.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I thought it was a very, very insightful transportation forum. Just next door to Ayer, of course, is also Devon's, and you represent all of Devon's, lots of fascinating issues, and yet I feel like a lot of people really aren't aware of what's happening in Devon's.
Yeah, the complex that is empty now that could be used for housing, I think that would be a great opportunity for us, Vicksburg Square, thank you, for us to be able to move into, because it's so sad to see so many empty units where it could really be transformed to housing.
Absolutely. Talk about, because we did some of the ribbon cuttings, the economic development at Devens, what you're seeing and what are the possibilities there.
Yeah, there's a lot of business who are in need of labor. And also the lack of some of the workers that they need some kind of transportation to be able to get to and from, and working on improving our public transportation system, because a lot of the families sometimes live in Lowell or Leominster or Fitchburg, they're trying to come to Devens to work. So really kind of, and I know it's always a challenge for them, because if you can't rely on Uber, for example, because it's very costly to get to. And I think adding more homes in Devens, I think would actually minimize, some of the workforce could even live in Devens.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're seeing Commonwealth Fusion there
yes,
now, the
yeah.
biomanufacturing. There's a green hydrogen company that's moving there. So it is, it's obviously, it's an economic target zone to attract more companies to the region.
Absolutely. It's growing so fast, very rapidly. All those businesses moving in there. So.
And I think you make a good point that with more employees coming, the need for more workers, where are those people going to be housed?
Right.
And, yourself, me and Senator John Cronin, who now represents part of Devens, are having that conversation about building more housing at Devens, whether Vicksburg Square or other parts of Devens.
Yeah, no, that's a need that we need to be discussing and maintaining, because they are going to need more housing there.
Absolutely.
So not only for the workforce, but for the residents. Look at in Ayer, for example, people getting displaced.
Right, with Devens Crest.
Yeah.
Well, you certainly have a very sort of diverse district, a lot of different needs.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your work. Obviously, we work together on a lot of these bills. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your public service.
Thank you. This is great. Thank
you,
Jamie.
Yeah, and thanks for those that have tuned in to Half Hour on the Hill. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge. Great conversation just now with Representative Dan Sena, and stay tuned for other interviews. Thanks so much.